What's good, YouTube? In today's video, I want to talk about my biggest fears about leaving America to live abroad in Southeast Asia. Alright, so like and subscribe to the channel, follow me on all social media platforms, and let's get into it. Alright, so I'd be lying if I say I wasn't scared to do this, I mean, who wouldn't be? That's a big decision, life-changing decision to drop everything that you know and love, friends and family, to go live in a different country and start all over with around people that you never know, that has a different culture than yours and was raised and brought up differently from the way you were. So it was most definitely a big decision, a nerve-wracking decision. And yes, I was most definitely had fears. But what I think it was, my urge for a better life outgrown my fears. At that time, when I decided to live abroad or want to move abroad, I was already laid off from my job. I was a local truck driver. I was making pretty decent money, at that time, and I got laid off due to my health condition. I couldn't stay healthy, and a lot of that was due to the cold weather. I was living in Chicago, and once those cold winter months came around, it just felt like I just couldn't stay healthy. It was really messing with my condition, and I have sickle cell anemia. So if you have that, and you know how the cold weather is, can affect your body, and it most definitely at that time was affecting me. Just couldn't stay healthy. Not only that, the company was going through a slow period. We wasn't getting a lot of freight, and they started to have to make some layoffs. I could tell that they didn't want to let me go because they had to do layoffs a few months. Like, I think they started doing layoffs in January of 2023. And I didn't get laid off until May of 2023. I wasn't in the first round or even the second round of layoffs. So I could tell that they really wanted to keep me on as much as possible. But I just started to miss too many days, just because I couldn't stay healthy, and, eventually they had to let me go. I was in the third round of layoffs, and, I had to go. So, that was devastating to me, being laid off, and now I got to figure it out. But one thing about that, it made me more stronger too. You know what I'm saying? Because it made me realize that I can't just rely on a job my whole life. My whole livelihood. I had to rely on a job to keep me sustained. Nah. So that I actually think that was a good thing for me. Once I thought about it, and everything settled, that it made me a stronger person. Obviously, it was devastating at the time, but I was already laid off for a year before I decided to, get this idea to move abroad, and I wasn't really doing much. And my biggest fear at that time was, getting into problems and, doing things that, I shouldn't be because I had too much time on my hand, And so, when I started to watch videos about people living in these foreign countries, especially like Thailand and these pretty much Southeast Asia in general, they were living in these nice high-rise condos with, nice amenities and everything for very affordable prices. I'm like, man, that sounds interesting. That looked cool. And, I started going down a rabbit hole on that. And, that pretty much, fulfilled my decision to move abroad. Hawaii gave me my first taste of it, and seeing those videos brought back that hunger, And so I moved forward, full steam ahead with that plan to live abroad. Luckily things worked out for me to be able to do that. And when the opportunity came around, I took it and I left. I left America back in June of 2024. this time Trump wasn't in office, and I took off and I left. My first country was the Philippines. I chose the Philippines after extensive research because the communication and the affordability. Yeah, I did have questions about that country when it came down to the healthcare. But that's pretty much the main in the infrastructure. The infrastructure was kind of concerning because everybody that would talk about the Philippines in the videos that I watched was talking about bubbles. They lived in a bubble, and then when she left outside those bubbles, that the infrastructure wasn't the best. And since I've been there, I can say that's true. So you most definitely want to stay inside one of the bubbles in like Manila, BGC, Makati, or if you're in Cebu Business Park, Cebu IT Park, or somewhere in Davao. And a lot of foreigners also live in Dumaguete or Iloilo. Those are some good places too. But I know some foreigners, some expats, they'll go live in the provinces and everything, and I couldn't do that. And that brings me to my first reason why I was afraid about leaving the U.S. was the healthcare system in the Philippines, and not only just the Philippines, just these third world countries in Southeast Asia in general. But most definitely, since the Philippines, since that was the first country I was headed to, I didn't know how the healthcare system was there. I heard, good and bad about it. But especially since I had a condition, I made sure that I stayed in the big city. That was, I wasn't going to compromise on that. I was going to stay in a big city. I had no desire to live in the provinces. That way I can get the best health care if I need it. And I did need it multiple times. So, yeah. So that's another thing that I would recommend. If you got any type of health conditions and you're thinking about doing this, most definitely want to stay within the major cities so you can get the best health care in those major cities. So the provinces was out of the question for me. So that was one of the fears that I had about leaving the U.S. to live abroad in a different country was the healthcare. Second fear I had was money. Obviously, right? To be able to sustain yourself in these countries, you need money. Even though they're affordable, everything still costs. And a lot of these countries, especially in these third world countries, they're still very reliant on a cash system. So you most definitely would need money. You know what I'm saying? Recurring money would be ideal. I know people that came over here on just savings alone, and they was able to make it work. Because they had a significant amount of savings, and they just didn't come over here and not try to do nothing, right? They tried to build an online business or something to bring in some recurring money. But I've also seen people that came on over here on little money and crashed and burned, and having to go back home within a few months, So money is a big issue, what I'm saying? It's most definitely a big problem that you want to most definitely solve before you come over here, You want to have a recurring income and some savings. You never know what could pop up. Like I said, healthcare. You might need healthcare. Just any unforeseen thing can just pop up. You're going to need savings, or you're most definitely going to need recurring income to sustain yourself. So that was my second fear. But I was pretty well secure. Before I came over here, I had a few streams of income coming in consistently. So that wasn't too much on my mind, but it was always in the back of my mind. It was always something you had to think about, especially when it came to budgeting, because you can easily get to these countries. Everything's so affordable, and you can just spend. You know what I'm saying? And that happened to me. You know what I'm saying? Because everything is just so cheap. You look like, wow, this ain't nothing. You look up, you done spent a couple $100 out of nowhere. Because that's how fast it can just go. Because everything's feels so affordable. So you want to be mindful of that. You want to know the value of that currency that's in that country. That's what I had to learn. learn the value of the currency of the country that you're going to. You know what I'm saying? Me, I was still thinking in dollars, US dollars. I wasn't thinking in Philippine pesos. Once I started to get that in my mind, like the value of a peso, I started to realize I didn't need to be spending as much money as I was. So that was something that, I had to really teach myself and come to grips with, that, hey, well, I'm in the Philippines, learn the value of the currency, and most definitely budget myself to the point that, I'm not just out here just spending money because everything's so affordable. So yeah, that was my second fear. Third fear, obviously, what if I got over here to these countries and to this other country and I didn't like it and I had to go back home, So that was my third fear. What if I didn't like the country? And I'm the type of person that try to stay positive on everything. Obviously there's a learning curve. You got to adapt to different countries, the culture there, and the local language. And this is where it comes to. This is where it comes in to be open minded. You have to be really open minded about these countries. You know what I'm saying? You really want to be sure about it. Do a test run. I didn't do that because I'm pretty open minded about things. But if I didn't like that country, I could just leave. So I didn't do no test run. I just went there, and things just worked out. But that's not for everybody, So if that's not you, go do a test run. See if you like it in that country. And I always say stay in the country for like 30 days. That's enough time to see if you're gonna like a country or not. But don't go there as if it's a vacation. Go there as if you're just living a normal, regular life. Go to the local market, the local grocery stores. Find you a local coffee shop. You know what I'm saying? Find you a local Facebook community to, reach out to when you need answers. Just find your way around, and not even that. Find some expats that's also in that country that can also help you. That's been there for a while. That can answer your questions. And you stay there for 30 days. That's enough time to find out if you like a country or not. And then if you don't like it, you can move on to something else. But that was my fear. What if I didn't like it? What if I didn't like it and I had to come back home? But my thing is I wasn't coming home, because there was so many other countries. If I didn't like that one, I'll go to another one, So I already had it in my mind I wasn't coming back. I was going to go try to do something else, what I'm saying? If I didn't like that country, I was going to go to another country. It was other countries that I was interested in, like Thailand, Vietnam, Panama, So it was other options, But not a lot of people can do that. They can just not just go to another country. So if that's not you, do a test run. But yeah, those are the three things that, was my biggest fear about leaving the U.S. The healthcare, money, and obviously, what if I didn't like it? You're never gonna be prepared. You never know what's gonna happen. Pretty much. You go to these countries, you never know what's going to happen. Only thing you can do is be open-minded, do a lot of research, be prepared as much as possible, and then when something does come around, you're prepared to handle it, So that's my biggest advice to people that's thinking about coming over here in 2026 and 2027. Make sure your money's right, most definitely do your research on the country that you plan on going to. And, also not just think about the negative, think about the positive. What if you do like it? You know what I'm saying? What if everything does go your way? You know what I'm saying? And and it goes the way you imagine. Think about that. Just not only think about the negative, because it can very well, go your way and you can very well like it. Then if you don't like it, have an option B, option C, and then you'll be fine. All right. So I just wanted to get on here and talk about that. Those were my three things that I feared about leaving the U.S. All right. Like and subscribe to the channel. Follow me on all social media platforms. Stay tuned for upcoming videos that I got coming. Peace.